Hello everybody. So this is the next video with dealing with the vacuum system on my car. So if you watched my previous videos where I have done a complete check on the climate control system, so I thought and I think that that thing all got straightened out and there's no more vacuum leaks, but I feel like there is still some vacuum leak somewhere because my secondary air injection pump still sometimes is running longer than it should, and that's my indicator. So what I'm doing today is I pull this white line that is connected to this main basically vacuum feed from the intake manifold. So if you reach over here you should be able to get it. So this line ends up with a 90 connection. So you take and you put your vacuum pump on this connection and you apply 12 inches of vacuum, and this is supposed to hold it, or the leakage should be no more than 1 inch per minute. Well, my leakage is much larger than that, so that's my indication that there's still somewhere there's something leaking. So the next thing to do is gonna be to test this manifold block. Everything comes into here, and this line that runs from the engine intake manifold runs into this manifold. So at this point I'm gonna disconnect all these lines, I'm gonna mark them, and I'm gonna test two check valves that sit inside this manifold. So as you can see, I've done this schematic, and this is the schematic of this manifold, or vacuum distribution manifold, and these are all my connections. So, and you can see that there's like two banks that have a separation, and there's two check valves inside. So at this point I want to make sure that these check valves are functioning properly, and first I'm going to disconnect all the lines from here, and I'm going to connect the line to number 1, and I'm going to check valve number 1, and then take this line off, or maybe leave it, and then connect something to probably number 4, vacuum this side, and make sure that check valve B is also functioning as it should. This is another representation of the vacuum distribution manifold. So if you look, this is how it's mounted in the car. This side goes down. So the top row, starting from the left, is going to be port 6, port 4, 2. The P port is over here, the port 1 on this side, and then the bottom row is port 7, 5, 3. Now with these connections you can see that I write it underneath where each this port is connected. So at this point I've disconnected all the lines from the manifold, and I removed two nuts here and here because I want to remove the manifold because it's kind of moving around. So I want to lift this bracket up and undo that screw that's holding this manifold. Now to remove the lines you have to be very careful. What I used this tool. It's basically a tool for removing all kind of clips on the interior but it works really well for removing these lines from the manifold. Now, to remove this manifold, there's a small Phillips screw on the bottom over here, so I should be able to reach with a small screwdriver and pull it off. Alright, so I got the manifold out, and I guess I'm gonna test it now. So all I need to do is just go to my vacuum line collection somewhere here, and I should be able to find a suitable piece of line with that connector, and I think this one should do. Alright, so I think that should do it. So all I need to do is just connect my vacuum pump to this line, and it should be okay now. Alright, so before I start testing, I'm just gonna have a quick look, because lots of people are complaining and say when they have a vacuum leak, the problem they find is this location where the steel ball is pressed in. Right here the plastic cracks, and as soon as the plastic cracks, then this lets vacuum through, and this is where their problem finds. So I'm looking at my manifold and I don't see that. I can see a white line, but not quite as to be a vacuum leak. Well, maybe, we'll see. Alright, so like I said, what I'm gonna start now, and this is, I guess it's helpful that every line has a number stamped next to it. So first I'm going to connect to line 1 over here, to port 1, and I'm going to test, probably behind here is the check valve, and then I'm going to connect line to port 4, this one, and I'm going to run the same check. Okay, so this is my little setup. This is the manifold. The line is connected to port 1, and it goes to my vacuum pump. And now I'm gonna start vacuuming, and we need to apply about 12 inches and then look for the drain rate. So we'll get it about 12 inches, and you can see how it's draining really fast. So maybe that's where the problem is. Okay, so the first time when I did this check on port 1, you saw, guys, that it started leaking and the vacuum was dropping. So I thought that the manifold is a problem, but I just decided to double check. So I've double checked all my connections and to make sure they don't leak, and I found there's a little bit of a leak in here. So I've replaced this connection, and I've tested each connection separately to make sure it's not leaking. And now I've applied the vacuum, and it's been sitting there for a while and it's not dropping, so which means check valve A in this manifold works fine. So now let's move to check valve B. Okay, so I've reconnected the line to port number 4, if you can see somewhere there, and I'm gonna start applying vacuum. And like I said, 12 inches, that's what should be. So that's about 12 inches. And I have to wait a minute. So far so good. I don't see any movement on the needle. So I'll wait a minute and see the results, but I can probably tell right now that the 2 check valves are functioning fine. So the needle didn't move at all, so I can conclude that the manifold seems to be functioning as it should. And now that I'm looking at the schematic, so here I can tell that this branch from the check valve up, so port 1, 2, 3, that works as it should, and the branch 4, 5, and 6 works fine, and there are no vacuum leaks there. Now the only question now is, what about port P, port 7? Because if I try to apply vacuum here, it will open the check valve and it will draw from these connections. So I have to think how I can test the manifold. Alright, meanwhile, the next thing that I'm wanted to check is gonna be the vacuum reservoir that sits over here under the front passenger side fender. And to do that, there are two lines. Alright, two lines, and it's black line with a gray stripe and red with a gray stripe, and both are port 5 and port 3. So I'm gonna vacuum test these two lines. Alright, so I've located the two lines. So this is the red line with the gray stripe, and that's a black line with the gray stripe, and I have them signed. So that's number 3 port connection, and that's number 5 port. So I've connected my vacuum pump to number 3 connection, and I'm gonna start vacuuming, and we'll see what's going on. So the vacuum is rising, but very slowly, and we need to vacuum about 12 inches. Alright, so this is about 12. Now I need to wait a minute. And I'm gonna set my well, so far so good. Being now about a minute and 30 seconds, and we're checking the vacuum, and it's holding just fine, and the needle didn't move at all. So we conclude, well, I conclude that the red line is fine. So now I'm going to switch to the black line. Right, so I've connected to the black line, and I'm going to start pumping now. So that's about 12 inches, and I'm gonna start my stopwatch. Alright, so we're waiting for a minute. Same time I'm watching this vacuum line. Okay, so a minute passed by. Let's check this. And the needle still didn't move, which is pretty good. So let's move to the next step. So looking at the schematic, so I've checked number 3, it's fine. I've checked number 5, it's fine. So the 3 and 5, those are the ones that run to the vacuum reservoir. Now I'm going to check number 7, and this one in my car, this is connected to the rear headrest release. Most of the time, if you look in a schematic, it says it's open, but my car has this line going to number 7. So right now it's been sitting there again for a minute or so, and it seems like this is fine, no problem there. So I'm gonna mark number 7 fine, and I'll keep going through all these connections to see which one is leaking and if there's any leaks. Alrighty guys, so I've tested every connection that runs here except the P, because actually I'm gonna try that. I'm just gonna hold the line. I'm just gonna close the line here, and I'm gonna connect my vacuum pump over there and see, maybe I do have a leak in this line, but I'll do that. But at this point I have tested every single line in here and I did not find any leaks. So that's my last line, the main line running from the engine intake manifold to the manifold and connecting to port P. That's my last line to check. Alright, I guess I have some kind of a good news and a bad news. So the good news is I did not find any leaks in these lines. Also, I didn't find any leaks in the line, in the main feed line from the engine. So the only other option is now try and test the vacuum system, because at this point I'm not running, the engine is off and the car is off. So, and therefore the vacuum flaps control manifold is also off. So what I'm thinking to do is I'm going to apply vacuum to this line. The green line runs to the I can't remember, that's Y11/2 or something, or /3, that manifold is called. And then just press different options and see if there's any leaks in actual manifold, in the connections, because that's my only other option. Alright, let's try and do that. Alright guys, so next what I've done, I've reinstalled the manifold, and now I have connected the two lines that on the port 3 and 5 that run to the vacuum reservoir. I've connected the line that runs to port 7, and that's the line that runs to my rear headrest release. And I have connected the line to port P. So this is the gray line that runs from the intake manifold. I've connected my vacuum pump to this side of that line, and I vacuumed it to about 12 inches. And that has been about a minute and a half, and I can see that it's still holding. So also what I need to mention, that I have taken some grease. I've taken some Parker O-Loop grease, and I've applied just a little bit to the end of this connection, and I hope that if there's a small vacuum leak that it will plug it. So I'm not really sure if it's gonna work, but I will see, because next I'm gonna connect these lines one by one, and I'm gonna be monitoring the vacuum in here to see if it's holding it. So far so good. So I'm gonna go and connect the next line in. Alright guys, so what I've done next is I've connected my vacuum pump to the green line. It hasn't been connected to the manifold yet. So I've connected it to the green line, and I put along a hose, you can see, and I got inside the cab. I turned the ignition on and I turned on the air conditioning. Well, not the air conditioning, but I turned on the climate control. And then I was running through all the different settings for the flap and checking as I would vacuum to make sure there's about 12 to 15 inches. And if I change the setting, then I vacuum it to get it where it should be, and I was monitoring if the vacuum would drop down. So everything was fine, so that kind of confirms that there's no vacuum leak from the line here to the flaps or to all the vacuum actuators. So after I've confirmed this, I reconnected the line to the manifold. So now, as you can see, I have all my vacuum lines connected. I've disconnected this line again, the gray line. Where is it running? Right here. So I have disconnected it from the engine, and I'm going to connect my vacuum pump here, and I'm going to double check if there's any vacuum leaks again. Alright, so I got my cell phone ready. I got my vacuum line connected to this hose or to this elbow, and now I'm ready to vacuum. So I'm gonna apply vacuum, and I'm gonna apply, let's go 13. I'm gonna set it down. Okay, I'm gonna start this, and I'm gonna wait probably maybe, I want to wait 5 minutes, make sure that there's no leaks. Alright, so getting close to the end of the 5-minute test, and right now I'm at about 4:45, and I'm looking where I am. So my vacuum dropped about 3/4 of an inch. So the allowable drop is about 0.9 inches in 1 minute. So we're right now at 5 minutes and we dropped less than 1 inch. So I think that's good. That should be. Now, conclusion, I guess. I haven't really found where was leaking, but I noticed one thing. The white line that runs to port number 7, it was kind of in tension. So as I tried pulling on it, I could not pull on that line, and I think when I installed it, it was pulling on a manifold, so it wasn't sitting straight, and could have been that was vacuum was leaking by that seal. So what I ended up doing, I went inside the cab, and let's see if my light is still there. So inside the cab over here, you can see, oh, oops, sorry. So inside the cab over here, you can see all these connections, and there was a zip tie right here, and that zip tie was holding this line on that side, so I could not pull the line. So I've cut the zip tie, and I'm gonna put it on, but I'm gonna kind of cinch the lines on this side so they kind of free. So that's the only conclusion I can make, that it probably was pulling on this line, and it might have been sipping air through that connection on the manifold. Alright, and I guess just to complete this video, I forgot to turn my vacuum off, and as I've been reinstalling all the inner pieces on the side wheel well there, and that's probably been like 10 minutes. So I come back, and right now, so 15 minutes, and they only drop about 2.5. Actually not 2, it was 13 minus 11, so that's only 2 inches and 15 minutes. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. Now all I have left is wait for the morning when I restart my car and see how long that stupid secondary air injection system is gonna run. Hopefully it's gonna run 90 seconds, and that's gonna be it. So just to make sure that I've covered all bases, I also replaced this seal on a flapper valve over here, and also there's a O-ring there. So I got those two replaced. Alright, so I have run the car, and my secondary air injection system ran for 90 seconds as it should, though after that it started one more time and ran for 2 seconds and then shuts off. But I had that before for a few times. So like I said, I'm gonna have to wait for the morning, because in a colder weather the thing was running longer. And I'll see. Also, what I noticed, my intake vacuum is about 1 inch higher. I used to run around 18 inches. Now it's running closer to 19, which is a good sign. So hopefully my vacuum leak disappeared, and that's gonna be the end of my fight. Well, thanks for watching, guys.